Let's get started with our prayer. So please close your eyes, take a nice big deep breath, and let it all go. I am here only to be truly helpful. I am here to represent him who sent me. I do not have to worry about what to say or what to do because he who sent me will direct me. I am content to be wherever he wishes, knowing he goes there with me. I will be healed as I let him teach me to heal. Amen. So as most of you know, we just had the 4th of July. Happy 4th of July, everyone. And when I think of the 4th of July, I often think of Bill Thetford. Most of you are familiar with Bill. Try to get the glare off of him. Bill Thetford was the co-author of the course, and I use the word author lightly because Helen and Bill do not have their names on the course. They just felt like they were the scribes, so we'll call them the co-scribes. So a lot of the information I'm going to be sharing today will be coming from a book that's called Never Forget to Laugh, and it's by Carol M. Howe. And this book was written by Carol to depict a lot about what Bill was all about. We talk about Ken oftentimes in class. We talk about Helen. We don't really talk about Bill that much. So I thought I would focus on Bill today. Now, as many of us might be aware, many of us had some challenges in our childhood, and that is actually quite true with Bill as well. When Bill was 7, his older sister, who he just loved, passed away very suddenly, and that was very difficult for the entire family. And shortly after that, Bill then got rheumatic fever and was in his bed for about 2.5 years. In fact, he had to relearn how to walk whenever he started to heal. He was from a lower middle class family that believed that physical work was the only kind of work, and it was totally for survival purposes. And due to Bill's illnesses, his father was rather concerned because he didn't know how he was ever going to make a living because he didn't have a lot of strength in his body. As Bill matured and grew into a manhood, he decided he was going to get a PhD in psychology. Well, to his parents, that was basically a waste of time. They felt that that was simply a worthless piece of paper that would be hung on the wall, and he would never be able to find a real job because a real job meant physical labor. Now, I often say that it's not really a classroom unless it hits below the belt. And you can imagine for Bill, that was a pretty rough start, having lost his sister and then being bedridden for 2.5 years, and having no support from his parents in regard to what he chose as his profession. And we would think that perhaps the two people that were going to bring the course into fruition would be these very high advanced people who had no problems at all. And as most of us, we often take this type of hurt or disappointment, and it becomes very internalized, and we carry it with us for decades, creating a bias for later conflicts and frustrations. So it's almost like we have these seeds, and then those seeds develop into large plants or trees as we keep feeding those seeds. And, if you think about that, being in the now represents no past, then how can I bring the past to the now and experience the now? And the answer is I can't. And yet, the way this world is set up, most of us are living in the past, dragging it with us and reinforcing it and bringing it to now. that, again, keeps us from total real healing. We bring all past associations with us when we observe anything, whether it's a person, an object, or a situation. In the course, we are asked to practice viewing everything with new eyes, allowing ourselves to see without the usual interpretations of judgment, bias, and ever-present questions. But we have to be very aware, as egos were set up to recycle all the things in the illusion. And we are constantly looking with eyes of judgment, attack, bias, prejudice. That seems to come with the territory. And we're being asked to look from a different level or different vantage point. But as long as we're focusing on this, we can't see what's available to us here. And it promises, let's see, it promises a sense of well-being and peace when we begin to view anything without our history laid on it and without the obstacle of accumulated thought. But as we know, for the most part, during our daily basis, we are constantly bringing, I don't have the thing I was looking for, we constantly bring to the moment everything from the past or fears of the future, which keeps this now experience filled to the brim. So we don't have room to have it filled with God's love. And so he's asking us to become aware that this is what we're doing, and that we then begin to empty that space so that we can allow the Holy Spirit to come through. But again, any type of a prejudice, belief system, thinking you thinking you are right, judgments, questions are all filling that space, which keeps us from experiencing the moment. So before Helen and Bill met, Helen was looking for a job, and she had this deal with Jesus that she was going to get this particular job, of which Jesus basically told her, no, you're not going to get that job, which eventually led Helen to apply for a job at the Columbia medical, I should have looked that up, but I didn't, medical something. And Bill was looking for an assistant, and a friend of hers suggested that she go and apply for this job. When she walked in and met Bill, she said, "My name is Helen Schuckman. I was told to tell you that I am the person you are looking for." Now, at that point in time, they had no idea about anything to do with the Course of Miracles. So in that moment, they had no idea what was in store for them, because eventually, after a series of a few events, they were led to the scribing of this course, where, because of the position that they held and the office space and the way it was laid out, they could work on this before it was time for them to work in the mornings, and they would not be interrupted. It was an easy flow. Let's see, Bill and I were on like an unlikely team, and in spite of our shared goal, we grated on each other's already jangled nerves a good part of the time. So there's a line in, I think it's in the manual for teacher. No, I'll have to look that up too, where it talks about the idea of levels of relationships. And one of the levels of relationship would be you seeing a little child in an elevator that's crying and you comfort them. Another level would be perhaps people that you went to school with, and for a number of years you were close, and then you separated and moved on with your life. And then there are those very specific relationships, parents, children, spouses, sometimes work relationships that are ongoing, where lots of classrooms can be established. But in the third one, it talks about the fact that these are custom-made relationships. But it goes on to say that they are relationships which are custom-made, but they could be a major initiation, a major classroom to help develop your ability to heal. So they're oftentimes not very comfortable relationships. And again, it's easy to think, well, why didn't Jesus pick two very high pious people who were meditating or praying 24 hours a day? Why did he pick on these people who, as Helen specifically stated, we grated on each other's already jangled nerves a good part of the time? And the reason is because I think the intent was to show that no matter who you are, what circumstances you're in, or how difficult the relationships are, that this is an opportunity for learning. It will not necessarily be a fun experience, but it does have the custom-made aspects that can take us to a place of healing. So every beginning A Course in Miracles student learns that the subjective experiences of one's outer circumstances faithfully reflect an outer state of mind. So basically what's going on inside is then projected on the outside, and we now experience the outside as separate from who we are. And so often the Course is trying desperately to bring us back to the realization, if I see it out there, it's going on in my mind. And if we look at this chart, we keep thinking all the problems lie here. I'm an innocent victim of circumstances beyond my control. I woke up this morning, I was perfectly happy and peaceful. I walked into work and my boss yelled at me. So now I've lost my peace. Therefore, it was the boss's fault that I lost my peace. But the Course has a very different approach to that, where it says you could never have lost your peace no matter what was going on in the world or what was going on in relationship to anything or anyone in your world, if it wasn't for the fact that you were identified with the ego. So rather than blame this person, we now use any upset, irritation to recognize I've lost my peace. That must mean I've chosen for the ego. And if I'm ready to take the next step, I can then choose by emptying out my mind of all the stories that it carries and ask the Holy Spirit to fill that in with a new story. That new story is always my brother and I are the same versus my brother and I are different. And I'm the innocent victim, you're the perpetrator. Well, over here, there's no innocent victim and perpetrator because we're all the same. It's only in the dualistic aspect that we could ever play that game. All right, so state, and I'll read that again. Every beginning A Course in Miracles student learns that the subjective experiences of one's outer circumstances faithfully reflect an inner state of mind. Stated more bluntly, the more guilt one carries, even though unconsciously, the more one feels punished by the outer circumstances. So as long as we're carrying guilt in our mind, which occurred the moment we chose to separate, when the answer was given that nothing happened, we took it seriously and then began the terror of carrying guilt and fear in our mind, of which then we decided to solve that problem by dumping it into the world so that I could play the part of an innocent victim. But the deal is, this still remains in our mind and it doesn't go away. So what the outward representation of an issue is really doing is triggering the memory in our mind that we have chosen against the love of God. So if we start to use this from the perspective of the ego, we then recognize I've lost my peace, must have chosen wrongly. I can choose again. Okay, how can I use this for my, wait a minute, let's see. We are asked to practice. Where did I leave off? All right, here we go. We see on the outside what we fear to own in ourselves. Okay, so all of this is a result of this. And this, the ego, the alignment with separation, is what is in my mind that I don't want to look at. So I play down here, pointing a finger at something or someone else, when all the while, it's really up here that needs to be healed. And I can point my finger all I want. I can blame, I can move away, I can try to fix it in the world, but it's going to come back up. Fireworks, come back up because this hasn't been healed. We see on the outside what we fear to own in ourselves. And as we begin to use the course to heal, we then begin to realize that if something on the outside disrupts my peace, I have something that I can do instead of blame somebody else. We're always seeing in our current relationship what was missing in former ones to require a present companions what past ones seem to withhold. Basically, what that means is we're constantly looking to fill the lack with something or somebody else. And oftentimes, perhaps we feel like our parents didn't give us enough attention when we were little. So we didn't get it there. So then when we move on to our next relationship, we think that individual is supposed to fill that void, which they won't, because the actual lack doesn't come from what they do or don't do. The lack comes from within. So we're constantly looking on the outside to have that lack filled in, but the lack can never be filled in by something on the outside. So we're, again, always seeking, but not finding, because the answer is not located outside. The answer is located within. So it's like we're not even on the same level of where the understanding of what the problem is. So we're just chasing our tail. It would be like being in a maze. And what we have to do is rise above the maze in order to access where the real problem is. But we're always going back and forth here, which sometimes can appear that something's shifted, something's changed, something's healed. And I often give the example of if it's raining down in your living, or excuse me, in your kitchen, you want to mop the floor so nobody trips and falls on the water. But if you don't go up and fix the roof, it's going to continue to rain down into your life. Even if this particular specific character shifts or changes in some way, it's going to find another one, because we're not going to where the cause is. We're just playing in the effect. Okay, so this world simply is not satisfying, no matter how much we may be getting away with. So in other words, I can manipulate things, I can make somebody feel guilty and they buy me flowers every week or whatever my specific thing is, but we're not going to ever feel fulfilled, because fulfillment doesn't come from the outside. We're always thinking out there rather than through the means that will actually bring us peace. And we have to become aware of this. As long as I'm chasing after the proverbial carrot and I never quite catch it, we're never going to be at a place of peace. And this is shifting that around, turning that around, and giving us the option that we will find healing and peace if we follow what Jesus is asking us to follow. So Bill realized that he would need to examine and release virtually everything he believed and questioned his ability to do that. So, like all of us, that's our goal as well, to examine, what am I doing? Am I judging my brother 24 hours a day? And this is not asking us to feel guilty if that's the result of your examination, but it does want you to become aware of what you're up to, because as you become more and more aware, you can't play the part of an innocent victim anymore, because you start to realize, wow, I am part of this game of I'm an innocent victim and you're the perpetrator. And as the Course says, on some level, I need and want you to be there in order to play the dualistic game. So it requires me to drop this storyline of the dualistic expression to find out what oneness is. And I don't have to figure that out. I need to let this step aside so that we can allow this to come forward. With every encounter, he discovered a new level of questioning his ability to do that himself in a larger and more loving way. So literally every time we ask for help, another layer of the ego is dissipating and a layer of truth starts to come and replace that. The consistent practice of the Course principles drive long-standing, limited beliefs from our original mind training into conscious awareness, so that we can decide whether to be bound by them or not. And I don't have the picture of the iceberg, but as some of you have seen the picture of the iceberg, the very, very top is what's exposed. It's like this little triangle. But from there on, there's this huge depth of the iceberg that is unconscious. We don't see it. We're not aware of it. We just know about the little cap on the top. But as we begin to work on healing of the things that are conscious and we hack away at those, it dissipates, and then another layer of the unconscious comes to the surface, and then we can look at that and bring that to healing if we are ready or willing to do so. So it's always about becoming aware, and you become aware by observing and looking at the situations that are going on, and becoming more and more aware of how this game is being played out all the time. And again, we're not asked to judge it or attack it, simply observe it from here. And when you're observing it there, you're not the character in the dream called whatever your name is. And somebody in the class gave a description of a situation that she had. For those of you who are in the Cleveland area, it's been very hot, very humid for days on end. And this particular gal does not have air conditioning, and she was trying to stay cool in the midst of all that. And she found herself exploding, yelling and screaming and carrying on. Not characteristic for her personality. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I know I'm guilty of doing that. In fact, I like to think of it as this green slime that comes pouring out of you. And first of all, I want to make the comment that it's great news when you have the opportunity to be able to really see that that's within you, because so many of us think, no, 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 I am an innocent victim. You don't understand. It's not about me. It's about them. So when we have an awareness, oh, wow, look at that. But we're asked to just simply observe it and not judge it or attack it. And in the process of her sharing her story, she started out by rather defending herself. Well, it's hot and I don't have air conditioning and I'm tired and so on. But the beautiful thing that she then shared was that she very quickly brought it back to observing instead of reacting to the actions that she was playing out, which is exactly what we're being asked to do, because the way the ego sets this up is, this person, and this person could be the lack of air conditioning. It doesn't have to be a person, but whatever makes me feel like an innocent victim, that's the problem. Well, when you regroup forces as quickly as possible, you're recognizing, oh, I've lost my peace, which means I must have chosen wrongly because I've chosen for the ego. And I can now ask the Holy Spirit to show me a peaceful resolve in this situation. And this is I'm going to call it a little bit of a description of what the ego is about. It's as if we have all been born and raised in a cult, with the ego as the tyrannical leader requiring absolute allegiance. That's the story of the ego. And I'll read it again. It's as if we've all been born and raised in a cult, with the ego as the tyrannical leader requiring absolute allegiance. That's what the ego is all about. It's basically a cult, a thought system of a lie. I did this chart quite some time ago. I think it's here. It's not. Anyways, let's see. Is that it? Oh, yeah, here we go. That basically, this is all a lie. This is the truth. The ego, the whole story is a lie. It's part of the cult reaction. And I have to become aware that this is running the show and that this is a lie so that I can turn to find out what the truth is. All right, since we know of no other way of being, in other words, before we came to the course, we had no clue that this was a game that we were playing. So why would I even consider going through this whole process? I knew nothing of it. All I knew was I was an innocent victim of circumstances beyond my control, and the only recourse I had was to try to make best out of what's going on in the world. And the course comes around and says, number one, you're not an innocent victim. Number two, you chose this position. You wanted to be an innocent victim to pull off this whole story. But you can now use that for a different purpose. Be reminded, I've lost my peace. Help, I must have chosen for the ego instead of truth. And now I want to choose for the truth. But we have to go through this whole deal because we're so involved in this cult as he described it. The Course in Miracles acts as a deprogrammer for our ego, which is a new form of mind training. And the Course even specifically calls this a mind training, especially with the workbook lessons. So you would think that once Helen and Bill started transcribing the Course, that all their relationship issues would have disappeared and become very peaceful and loving. But as the story goes, while they were transcribing the Course, doing their business in regard to the Course, they did what they needed to do. They stayed at peace. But that was the only time. In fact, their situation became increasingly hostile, not healing. And the reason why is because they were projecting onto each other, which is exactly what all of us are doing all the time. So for many in the practice of the Course, initially, life seems to get worse before it gets better. Now, that's not very comforting. I came here for answers. I came here to be healed, and I'm doing the work, and it gets worse. That's not very helpful. And at the same time, as the line in the Course says, but since tolerance for pain is only so high, eventually we keep working at this until the point where we go to healing. So when Ken entered the scene, he was actually appalled with their relationship. He had read through the material. He was in awe of the material because he knew it came from a very high spiritual level. And here are the two people that co-scribe this course, and they can't even look at each other without wanting to get at each other. And in this process, Bill blamed Helen for the problems in their relationship. He thought the relationship was not healed because Helen wouldn't change her mind. He was always blaming her and feeling that if only Helen would change, he would be healed. And this goes on to say that was a blind spot for him. So in other words, this is a course in healing me. It has nothing to do with the other character. When my mind is healed, I will then move to the other side of the chart. Here we go. Okay, in my mind, when I go over here, then I'll see the world through the lens of healing. I will no longer be playing in my mind in the dualistic party. That doesn't mean the other person won't still be believing in the cult, but I will see them as totally healed. And so that the healing has to come from me. And it is very tempting, especially in a world of, I push the button on the TV and it pops on. We want to see effects in the world that prove that my work is being done properly and I am healing. And in essence, it's about me being at peace no matter what's going on the outside. And I think if we take the example of Jesus dying on the cross in the course, horrible, awful, terrible things were happening to him. That didn't change. What changed was he aligned completely with the right mind. And then when he looked out, he saw his brothers either expressing their love or calling for love. And his response, unequivocally across the board, no matter what was going on, is love, which is the total and complete opposite of the way the ego plays the game. I'm going to wait for you to do something different so that I would be okay. And I hope by now, oftentimes when we work in this way, we may be able to manipulate the person to do something that makes us think we're at peace, but then tomorrow I've got to manipulate again and again and again. And I never come to a place that's healing, that it is completely healed, not just informed. All right. So again, Bill had to come to the resolve. It wasn't his job, number one, to make Helen happy, and it wasn't her job to change so that he could be okay. And as you can see, Helen and Bill's particular function of bringing the course into the world did not give them a free pass to enlightenment. Okay, so Bill, like all of us, struggle with being okay, being worthy, having a right to be here. And most of those needs are measured by others' approval. If someone tells me I'm okay, or if somebody tells me I did a good job, then I will feel that way. But even when that happens, do we feel that way? I mean, how many people, if you give them a compliment, they get all flustered, oh, this is something older, whatever, because we don't believe that we're worthy of that love. And nothing in the world that this person or situation could do or say or act could ever make me feel worthy unless I'm aligned with truth. It's not found here. And that's not their responsibility to do it. It's my responsibility to choose differently, and then I'll experience the world through the lens of being healed. And the other person doesn't have to do anything different. And I know there's a line in the course where it says, in a situation, whoever is the most healed has the opportunity to choose differently. And if you stop and think about it, if you're aware of that, you have the opportunity to ask for healing. But if another person doesn't know anything about this, it's not very likely they're going to step up to the plate and be the ones that are going to ask for healing. And if it's you that's aware that you're not at peace, it's your ability to make that change. Okay, and I think one of the reasons why I was really drawn to sharing a lot about what I'm sharing today is to make you very aware that Bill and Helen were normal people in the world that struggle with stuff from their childhood on, and that we keep repeating these patterns in our lives, and that working on the course is a process. It's not I think I read something last week about Ken saying this is not a 1, 2, 3 job. This is an undoing process that we're literally undoing that started at the Big Bang and was reinforced over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And now we're starting very slowly to choose to connect with truth. So as Bill began to move further into the course, he became more and more determined to notice the times he lost his peace, that his self-image was threatened, or when things weren't unfolding as he thought they should. Now, isn't that a perfect description of an ego? All the times we lose our peace, we're threatened by our self-image, or the world is not working according to little God Mary Ann. And in the past, this was going on all the time, but we weren't aware of it. He started to hone in on this process and really work the process so that he would find a way to become aware of this so that the healing could occur. So we're being invited as well to notice the times you've lost your peace. You know, if I don't know that I've lost my peace and I'm just running on empty, I guess you could say, there's what's there to fix, what's there to ask for help about. It's only when we become aware that what's running the show is not working very well. And just look at all the ways of which your self-image is crushed. Someone doesn't look at you. Someone doesn't pat you on the back when you think you did a good job. But if you really believed you did a good job, why would you need someone to pat you on the back? And the answer to that is because of your self-loathing, because you don't believe you're worthy of that love. Right. So as swiftly as possible, he would choose to let them go, realizing that he was the author of his own distress. So the only way we can find out what the distress that I carry within is by looking at how I respond to the world. So again, we then, this was set up to keep us going back and forth. Now, this is the setup for us to become aware of when I lose my peace, that I must be aligned with the ego and I can choose differently. But without that knowledge, I'm going to continue to chase my tail over here. All right, so again, as swiftly as possible, he would choose to let them go, realizing he was the author of his own distress. And boy, that's a hard concept for us to really grasp, hold on to, believe, and then live an immediate response, because we get pulled into the storyline. I'm an innocent victim, and I don't have to even say those words. Anytime I think that something's not working the way I think it should, I'm playing that game. All right, so in choosing to release his grievances, quiet his mind, and live defensively. Well, look at all the times we think we need to be in power, we need to be in control. And that really comes from us thinking that basically we've taken over the throne. So now I've got to be in control. And to relinquish that control means I don't know. I don't know what the problem is. I don't know what the solution is. I don't know how to get to the answer. And when we can recognize that I don't know, that's the rich soil of which the seeds of love can grow. Because then you get off the throne, ask for help, and that's when the Holy Spirit can fill in that space and bring you to love, peace, joy, connectedness. And then you're truly innocent, not an innocent victim, but you're brought back to the truth of the innocence of who and what you are. But in order to do that, I have to relinquish the story of the ego. Now, obviously, when you first start in any particular situation, you're probably likely to get pulled into the story. You might kick and scream for a while. But when the concept of, oh, that's right, the Holy Spirit, or excuse me, the Course is telling me that these are the steps that I should take, once that point comes to the surface, then you have the opportunity to ask for help. And the response to that help is going to be peace, love, joy, eternity, oneness, and the same. But I have to be aware that that's the game that's being played. As long as I'm floating around thinking I'm an innocent victim, I'm not going to hone in onto that to a point where I can respond back. And I mentioned the story that somebody shared in the group of how she came to the point where she responded a little more quickly from her spewing around the room, and she became aware that she did not want to stay there any longer. And as we practice this, we will become much more observant, we'll pay attention more, we will become less and less tolerant of the pain and suffering that is caused when we're aligned with the ego, and we will step forward into help. I don't know how to do this much more quickly. He was letting go of the learned untruth about himself as he let go of the grievances, as he let go of the defensiveness and the desire and the need to be right. Then he was letting go of the learned untruth about himself. So he was basically relinquishing this, or the lie, to find out the truth of who he was. Imagine no need to defend, impress, convince, or dominate. That's where our true release lives. And it's also very important that, sometimes people are very kind to everybody else, but they're abusive towards themselves. In order to be able to tell if you're one of those people, I know I am, is what is the self-talk going on in your mind? I'm too fat, I'm too tall, I'm not smart enough, there's something wrong with me, I don't belong here. Just listen to the words that are cranking in your thoughts, because these are telling you how you treat yourself. And if you were in truth, the only thought you could have is, I'm loved, I'm totally loved, and there's nothing else. Anything else in the storyline of the lie is going to eat at you until we finally relinquish it. All right, so the more wholeheartedly present we are for others, the more we disappear and the more everyone gains. I'll be very aware that the world as it is set up is all about me. I'm the hero of the dream. Everything's about me, whether it's positive or negative. It's about me. And the only real answer is way up here when you rise above the battleground. And it's not about me anymore. And I thought this was a cute little line. We gather up all the I, me, mine thought patterns and roll them up to almost nothing. And when we do that, our happiness will increase. Because as long as it's about me, I'm in duality, because it's always me against you. And again, you can be a person, place, situation. It doesn't have to be a person. Obviously, it gets played out with the experience of a person, but ultimately it can be anything. But as long as we're doing this, we're different. And if you notice over here, it's the same. If I can't have the me, my, I game going on here. It only lives over here. I'm going to read that again. We gather up all the I, me, mine thought patterns and roll them up into almost nothing, and then our happiness will increase. So deeply listening to others is an act of love. And just think of when you have a conversation with somebody, how frequently you're not paying attention to what they're saying, and you're already trying to churn up in your mind some kind of a response to what they're saying. We're so trapped in this character called me. And how we carry the stories of the pattern of our past. Bill felt his father was not present for him physically or mentally, and he carried the belief that his father felt that the wrong child died. In other words, it should have been him instead of his sister. Now, did his father really say that? Or did Bill just pick that up and chose to carry it around and put it in his pocket and drag it around with him? So he always had that story to tell that his dad did not love him the way he should. And that's, this is a game we're all playing in very subtle manners across the board. And what we're being asked to do is observe those, pay attention to them. How often does that pop in my mind? How often do I give that attention rather than the attention of the moment where healing can happen? And remember, it's only me that can make the difference. The sliding door of believing the ego, and basically believing the lie, and believing the lie would be any story that the ego comes up with. If I'm giving focus and energy to this, I'm saying stay away truth. I have to be willing to drop the stories in order to have the blank page so that the Holy Spirit can fill it in with what the truth is. Any story I carry, any story, doesn't matter how big or small, it's a story and I'm carrying it, I'm keeping myself from experiencing the truth. And because our whole life is based on me, the central figure of the story, and how valuable and important I am, I don't want to let go of that oftentimes. And certainly when I think I'm right about a situation, I don't want to let go of that either. And I can literally get 1,000,000 people to stand behind me to support my choice, and I'm still wrong according to this. Because in the world of oneness, there is no duality. And if I insist that I have to be right, that has to make my brother wrong. And as long as I'm playing from duality, I'm closing the door to the concept of oneness. And also be very aware that we pick and choose the stories we want to carry with us. And oftentimes we pick maybe 10, 12 experiences that were good and a bunch of them that are bad, and we carry those around in our little bag, and we just wait for the moment to take it out and use this as an excuse for my lack of peace. But literally there's bazillions of things going on every moment, every day. Why do we hone in on those? Because those work to perpetuate the illusion. Now, later on, at one point, Bill's father came to his new office and destroyed it. Now, I always talk about lessons that hit below the belt, that would hit below the belt. And as long as we carry that story about our father in this situation, we are saying, I cannot forgive my brother. this one's, this one, we're not letting this one pass. And isn't that a beautiful way to keep the illusion going? And I'm not saying this is easy. In fact, I'm going to tell you, this is downright difficult. How do I observe my father coming into my office and destroy it and keep my peace? And I know we all have different stories. Every person in this room or everyone listening to this have some pretty raw, painful, juicy stories that seem very legitimate and give me the right to continue to hate, to judge, to attack. And what this is saying, that will just simply perpetuate the innocent victimhood of your experience, and it will never bring you to truth. Because you see, in truth, we're the same. I can't be an innocent victim of a circumstance that's beyond my control and live over here. That would have to take me back here. All right, so why? And Ken would often say about this specific story, because let's face it, I think everybody in this room or anybody watching would be very devastated with that happening in their lives. And again, some of us have had even more difficult classrooms than that. But Ken would ask of him, or any one of us for that matter, why would you choose to give anything that much power? And when we do that, we're literally putting God under the bus. We're actually putting ourselves under the bus as well, because we're not aligned with who we are. We're aligned with the dualistic game that gets played out. And as long as we're doing that, we can't access this. And, for years and years and years, this was the storyline that Bill would bring up frequently. And how many stories do we bring up frequently? It's like it happened 20 years ago, 100 years, 50 years ago. It could have been with a person that's passed on. But I bring it out of my bucket and put it down into the now. And, there's nobody that's going to say to you that, this isn't difficult to work on and to practice. But I think it's also important to realize that the healing doesn't come from you. We're not asked to pretend I know what healing is. We are asked to look at the fact that I'm holding on to a dualistic story and I need help. Holy Spirit, show me what truth is. But again, in order to do this, I have to drop this, because to be very clear, it's one or the other. I cannot hold on to this and have access to this, because it's a sliding door. It either goes this way or this way. Nowhere do these meet. This line in the middle separates the stories, and nowhere do these touch. So again, if I'm carrying the story, I haven't relinquished to the point where I allow the door to open to the truth. Okay, so as normally what all of us would probably do at this time in our process, we would react self-destructively. We would walk around going, I can't believe my father did that. How could he possibly do that? Why didn't my father love me? He should have been nicer to me. Why did he think my sisters should have lived instead of me? All these stories, again, deep-seated, painful, almost horrific stories, but it's me that's keeping them alive, not the scenario. So we need to use the scenario for a different purpose, but don't get stuck in the scenario. So the purpose of the healing is to demonstrate that no amount of misperception has influence at all on the Son of God. Now, this is a tricky statement because you can't pretend this. You can't go, okay, my father messed up my office. I don't know why he did that, but I'm going to let him off the hook. That's not what we're asked to do. We're asked to take the lie, recognize the lie represents something within me that needs to be healed, and I want to bring it to healing. But don't push it under the carpet and say, oh, that doesn't bother me, because it does. If it keeps coming up to the surface and eating you, you know it's not lying down. It's just hiding. It's not being healed. And we really want to bring this to the healing that is complete and not just a cover up. So this I'm going to read that. The purpose of all right, let's see. To demonstrate that no amount of misperception has any influence at all on the Son of God. This demonstration exonerates those who misperceive by establishing beyond doubt that they have not heard anyone. Again, whoa, how do I do that? Because my eyes, my ears, my thoughts, my emotions are all fed into the story that this happened, it was unfair, I'm an innocent victim, and they're responsible for my lack of peace. Now, when we can turn this around, and again, that may take a very long time before we can 100% shift that to a place of total healing and trust of truth instead of the story. But when that can happen, then we're establishing a new story for the world. And if you think about this as two egos, and if one of you stops the flow, this ego is influenced, whether they change or not. We have presented an awareness that we don't have to play the game of kill or be killed anymore. And this person may be ready to shift and come to this point, or they might need to go somewhere else and find somebody else to pick on because the game is gone from you. Bottom line is, doesn't matter what they do. What matters is that you found your place in your center of choosing for truth instead of perpetuating the lie. All right, so each one of us have to ask honestly whether he is willing to demonstrate that his parents or anything else that happens in the world have not hurt us. Again, talk about climbing to the top of the mountain. Or as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, the course is like driving through the mountain instead of going up and around or all the way around this way. This is the quicker and easier, excuse me, not quicker, easier. This is a quicker route, but boy, is that quite an undoing process. But until Bill or we are willing to do this, we have not forgiven them. And, a lot of times people will say, well, I thought I forgave so-and-so, but it keeps rising to the surface. If this is happening, there's a very good chance that you haven't totally come to the healing that this is talking about, where there's no more gunk between you and your brother. You totally unequivocally have released that into the truth, and you're no longer harbor the lie in any way, shape, or form. Heavy duty stuff, very powerful, can be accomplished, but we got some work to do, you might say. And once again, these are the people that chose to work on, to be the scribes of the course. They had to go through the steps of healing just like we do. And obviously, in not a particularly comfortable or fun process either. All this talking making me thirsty. All right, so Bill had some very difficult lessons to deal with Helen. His parents were a difficult situation, and most of you know that he was also gay, and I'm sure Back in that time frame, it wasn't as acceptable as it is today. So he had lots of pretty heavy duty classrooms to work on. Not to deny what any one of us have to work on, but that was part of his deal. And especially with Helen, he knew that that was pretty difficult, and that was a one-on-one situation that he dealt with almost every day. So he decided he was going to begin to work on the healing from maybe not quite as big of an issue, a little smaller one that he could tinker with in practice. And as we know, the course specifically states there's no order of difficulty, so we can apply this to anything. But from our vantage point, it certainly appears some things are much more difficult than others. So he decided to work with a fellow that happened to be employed where he was, and this fellow's name was Art. And Art did not like Helen. He told Bill unequivocally he should get rid of Helen, or excuse me, he should get rid of Helen, and that she had no place where in that business, and he should do that right now. Of which Bill, at this point was already beginning to work with Helen in transcribing the course, so he knew that wasn't something he could possibly do. And he did not tell Bill, or did not tell this fellow Art what was going on, but he knew he could not fire Helen. So he told him he was not going to fire him. And from that moment on, Art refused to look at him, to talk to him, or have any connection with him. So Bill decided that he was going to actually come to his office every morning, because he knew that Art got there early and began to read the newspaper before work started. And Bill would just come in his office and sit. He didn't say anything. He didn't do anything. He just quietly sat. This went on for months. And then one day, Bill decided that he was going to say hello. And he did. And all he got from Art was a big grunt. And then he continued to sit there every day. And one day he had a meeting or something, so he couldn't be there at his regular time. So when he walked in, Art said, "Well, where were you this morning?" And Bill explained that he had another appointment. And at that point in time, they began to speak. But notice how this unfolded. It wasn't just, I try this, I get the response. He continued to work with this day after day after day. And the story goes on to say that they were at a convention and somehow they had overbooked the convention. And they asked people if they would mind sharing rooms so that they could compensate or allow for everybody that came to the conference. And Bill came up to Art and asked if they could room together. And he said there was nobody else he would prefer to room with than Bill. So we can practice this in small ways. Maybe the way you handle it will look very different than the way Bill did. But the point being is there a desire in my mind that I bring whatever relationship is going on to a more healed place? All right, so throughout the course, we are told in every way possible that attack must stop, and the defenses are not only unnecessary, but counterproductive. And again, even the attacks and the defense needs to go through the filter of dropping them and asking to have them be healed. It's not like, okay, I'm not going to attack and I'm going to hold it within. And, it's not if you've ever studied some metaphysical things that have to do with diet and health and whatnot, they often say that when someone doesn't express themselves properly, that they may have some illness or something because they're not expressing themselves. So this is not about denial. It's not about pushing it down. It's about becoming aware of it and asking to have it healed, not hiding it under the carpet. So I'm going to read you a couple lines here that I find quite beautiful. And this is a description of a circumstance that happened between Carol, who was the author of the book we've been I was talking about, and Bill. She said, for one moment, he suspended all prejudice, judgment, and expectations of me, providing a mirror unclouded by egoic perceptions and needs. In that clear mirror, he showed me who I really am and opened the door to the way home. So when we are able to do this, when we get completely out of the way, we then become that clear mirror, and we're not playing this game anymore. And in that situation for her, he opened that door. She was ready to walk in that door so they could join on a totally different level. But as long as we're playing the game of you're the problem, kill or be killed, that can't happen. So I'm going to read that again. For one moment, he suspended all prejudice, judgment, and expectations of me, providing a mirror unclouded by egoic perceptions and needs. And isn't that where we're always coming from? The perception of I need something from you to fill me up, and whatever that may be. It's a story that keeps us from knowing our brother. In that clear mirror, he showed me who I really am and opened the door to the way home. And as we return to an innocent perception of each other, the Christ comes forward and reveals the self, capital S, that is always present. So that self is here, it's covered over by the ego, or we want to do it this way. We know that just like the sun, the Holy Spirit is there. It's simply covered over by the belief system of the ego, but it's always there. And what is required is removing the blocks to the awareness of that truth. But I have to start by becoming very aware of what the ego is all about. Because most of us think it's about somebody else doing something else different so that I'll be okay. But it's really about the identification with the ego that I relinquish to allow truth to shine through. All right, so be aware, if you did not feel guilty, you would never attack. So the problem isn't the triggering of the person that causes you your seeming lack of peace. It's that you harbor guilt within your mind. So again, if you do not feel guilty, you could not attack, for condemnation is the root of attack. So I feel condemned. I don't feel worthy of love because I believe I killed off God to exist. It is the guide that obscures the Father to, or excuse me, the guilt that obscures the Father to you, and it is the guilt that has driven you insane. And when we align with the guilt, we are not recognizing who we really are. Because as long as I'm over here, I've lost contact with who I really am. And the whole deal with the ego is to keep us going right here. And when we keep going right here, we can't know who we are. And again, I can't be here and here. I have to relinquish this in order to find this. And as long as I'm aligning with this, there's no access to the truth of who I am. Though it's right here, I have to slide the door over here so that I can align with the effects of that choice. Okay, here's a delightful line that you're all just going to love. Whenever you consent to suffer pain, to be deprived, unfairly treated, or in need of anything, you but accuse your brother of attack upon God's Son. The Course always brings it back to all of our distress is coming from our own self-attack. So again, whenever you consent to suffer pain, be deprived, unfairly treated, or in need of anything, it is always coming from your belief in separation, which equals the belief in lack. And so whenever you experience lack in any shape or form, you are saying, I am not worthy of God's love. And then we blame it on something or somebody else, instead of realizing that's simply the effects of choosing for separation. So the Course always brings it back to all of our distress is coming from our own self-attack. I don't remember who I am because I attacked myself by choosing this, because I'm either here or here. And when I'm aligned with this, I've attacked this. And realized that healing was not tied to some special skill, but was the automatic result of releasing grievances, a gift available to all men, women, and children who choose a defensive, forgiving way of relating. And here's a cute little line that Bill used. We are all angels with amnesia. We are the radiance of our true self, which can never change or be tarnished in any way. We are assured your worth is established by God. Nothing you do or think or wish or make is necessary to establish your worth. So going back to the line, we are all angels with amnesia. Be very aware all the many ways amnesia gets played out. We were here, we chose for the separation. When we chose for the separation, we drew a line here where I would not remember what this was. We then sat in this, which was guilt, sin, and fear, couldn't tolerate it. So we projected it into the world, and then we drew another line of amnesia. So I wouldn't remember that this was the cause and this is the effect. So when he talks about we are all angels with amnesia, we are literally the Holy Son of God with amnesia because we're playing this part instead of the truth of who we are. So just as a recap of this, Bill Thetford died on the 4th of July, 1988. And the day before he passed, he shared with his sister that he felt so good, he felt so free and so complete. And he told her that all his grievances were gone, absolutely gone from his mind. She went through the list of relationships that she knew Bill had struggled with, and he explained to his sister how he finally released his attachment to each one. He explained that he talked to this one, he wrote a letter to that one, and he felt he had no more baggage. He was cleaned out inside and out, and he was complete with everyone. The next day was the 4th of July, and he went to Judith Scutch's house, and she was having a big party. And he again said, today is my Independence Day. And she asked if he still felt free. And he said, yes, it's my Independence Day. He had gone from being restricted, reserved, and inflexible to expansive, flowing, and inclusive. So again, he had to go through all the steps that each one of us are struggling to go through. And we all have many restrictions, reservations, we're inflexible, we hold on, we grasp what the ego is all about. He willingly stripped himself of his persona, psychological armoring, prestige, unhelpful habits, and presumptions. Throughout the process, he danced, laughed, and struggled, joked, despaired, and supported, loved, feared, and prayed, and steadily forgave his way to the end, soaring in a glorious finale, worthy of the grandest of operas that he adored. All right, so let me just read two more little things, I think, and then we'll close. And the first one is, the traits he cultivated, the ones that led him home, are well within everyone's reach. A daily, steadfast determination to let all the conflict, the ego sustenance, the willingness to make peace of mind the primary goal for each encounter. And how many of us make that our goal, our primary goal, above everything else? Or how many of us continue to try to be right and prove the other person wrong, and we don't care about the highlight of coming together? We need to relinquish our defenses, our attachments, and the valueless investments, though not necessarily our worldly possessions. So this isn't about getting rid of things of the physical. This is about changing your mind, healing your mind. We can get rid of all our stuff, but if we play in the game of our mind, grasping and holding, it won't matter. Some form of separation will get played out. We cherish our grievances rather than each other. And I'll repeat that. We cherish our grievances rather than each other, as if they were precious heirlooms, but we can change our minds. And again, changing our minds is totally up to us to decide. And let me just real quickly comment on Judith was checking in with Bill, and she was going through the list of people that he had grievances with. And then she said, and what about Helen? He laughed and said, how could I not forgive Helen? She was the opportunity for me to learn forgiveness. And ultimately, that's the bottom line. Our brothers are our opportunity to go home, because I won't know what's going on in my mind here if it wasn't for this. So when anyone triggers me and I feel like an innocent victim, that's the, ring the bell. That means that what's being triggered is my belief in separation. So my brother actually becomes my salvation. Okay, I'm just going to read one more paragraph and then we will close. Without defenses, I'm sorry, and this is in workbook lesson 135, paragraph 20. Without defenses, you become a light which heaven gratefully acknowledges to be its own. It will lead you on in ways appointed for your happiness according to the ancient plan begun when time was born. Your followers will join their light and yours, and it will be increased until the world is lighted up with joy. And gladly will your brothers lay aside their cumbersome defenses, which availed them nothing and could only terrify. So again, without our defenses, we become the light of heaven. And we gratefully acknowledge to be our own. And when you do this, it leads you to your appointed happiness according to the ancient plan. And again, the moment we had the thought of separation and we took it seriously, the Holy Spirit gave us an answer, and the answer is nothing happened. And we have to be willing to embrace that as a possibility and want that more than anything else. And with that, that will be the light that will take us forward. And Ken would often talk about the idea of as we're starting out on this journey, that we call on Jesus, we ask for his help. And he described it as, we're laying in bed and we're calling on Jesus, and he brings us a glass of warm milk, and then he tucks us in and gives us a kiss on the cheek. But the ultimate goal is for us to stand up and walk next to him so that we can be that radiance of light and love and healing that is possible when we choose to only align with the truth and let the lie go. And so it is. Happy 4th of July, and may you find your day of freedom. So everybody close your eyes and take a nice big deep breath. Forgive us our illusions, Father, and help us to accept our true relationship with you, in which there are no illusions and where none can ever enter. Our holiness is yours. What can there be in us that needs forgiveness when yours is perfect? The sleep of forgetfulness is only the unwillingness to remember your forgiveness and your love. Let us not wander into temptation, for the temptation of the Son of God is not your will. And let us receive only what you have given and accept but this into the minds that you've created and which you love. Amen. All right, thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time.